The massive crystalline spires of New Terra stretched toward 3 moons hanging in the alien sky. Ambassador Ixthara, known throughout the galaxy as the Dragon Queen, stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of the diplomatic tower, her scaled form casting long shadows across the marble floor. Her amber eyes, each the size of a dinner plate, surveyed the human colony with barely concealed disdain. For 3 cycles, she had endured their pathetic attempts at hospitality. The humans kept offering her their finest delicacies, arranged on golden platters with garnishes that cost more than most beings earned in a standard year. Roasted nerf steaks from Altair Prime, crystallized honey from the singing bees of Vega 7, even the legendary blue pearls of the deep-sea leviathans from Kepler 442b. Each meal was a masterpiece of culinary art, prepared by the greatest chefs in known space. And each one tasted like ash in her mouth. "Your Excellence," came a nervous voice behind her. Junior Ambassador Williams approached with yet another ornate invitation. "The colonial governor requests your presence at tonight's feast. They've prepared the crown jewel of their collection, genuine Earth salmon, flown in from the home world at tremendous expense." Ixthara's tail, thick as a tree trunk and covered in midnight blue scales, swept across the floor with a sound like grinding stone. The young human took an involuntary step backward. At 20 feet tall, when standing upright, the Dragon Queen commanded respect through presence alone. Her species, the Drakthari, were among the most ancient and powerful beings in the galaxy. They had been exploring the stars when humans were still discovering fire. "Tell your governor," she said, her voice a low rumble that made the windows vibrate, "that I appreciate his continued efforts, but I will not be attending another royal banquet. The food, while undoubtedly expensive, lacks something I cannot quite identify." Williams swallowed hard. "Your Excellence, with respect, the governor is becoming concerned. This is the 7th banquet you've declined. The Colonial Council is beginning to wonder if we've somehow offended you. The trade negotiations depend on your goodwill." Ixthara turned her great head toward the young diplomat. Among her people, she was known for her patience and wisdom, qualities that had made her an ideal ambassador. But 3 cycles of elaborate meals had worn that patience thin. "I am not offended, little human. Your people try very hard to impress me. Perhaps too hard. I don't understand, Your Excellence." The Dragon Queen moved to her desk, each step causing the floor to vibrate slightly. Her massive claws, each one carefully manicured and polished to a mirror shine, picked up a data pad containing the trade proposal. The document would establish humanity as a minor partner in the Galactic Commerce Alliance, opening up markets across 17 systems. For the humans, it represented the chance to expand beyond their current 12 colony worlds. For Ixthara's people, it was a minor addition to an empire that already spanned 3 spiral arms. "Your species is young," she explained, not unkindly. "You try to prove your worth through grand gestures and expensive displays. But sometimes, little human, the most valuable things cannot be purchased." Williams nodded, though confusion was clear on his face. "What would you suggest, Your Excellence? How can we better accommodate your needs?" Ixthara considered this. In her 400 years of life, she had attended diplomatic functions on hundreds of worlds. The pattern was always the same: rulers and governments trying to outdo each other with increasingly elaborate displays of wealth and sophistication. She had eaten foods that took teams of chefs days to prepare, drunk wines aged for centuries, and been presented with gifts worth more than entire star systems. But lately, something felt hollow about it all. Perhaps it was her age, or perhaps it was the growing distance she felt from the simple pleasures that had once brought her joy. She remembered being a young dragonling, no bigger than these humans, delighting in the simple sweetness of crystal fruits from her home world's gardens. "I require some time to consider your people's proposal," she said finally. "Perhaps I will explore your colony personally, without the formal protocols. I wish to understand humans as they truly are, not as they present themselves in throne rooms and banquet halls." Williams looked uncertain. "Your Excellence, I would need to arrange security details, formal escorts, perhaps a guided tour with our finest." "No." The word came out with enough force to rattle the decorative vases on nearby shelves. "I will go alone, in my smaller form. I wish to observe your people when they believe no one of importance is watching." The ability to assume a humanoid appearance was one of the Drakthari's most useful traits for diplomacy. In her smaller form, Ixthara stood only 7 feet tall, with distinctly reptilian features, but able to pass for one of the many alien species that visited human colonies. Her scales became less pronounced, more like an intricate tattoo pattern across pale green skin, and her eyes shifted to a more manageable size, though they retained their striking amber color. Williams opened his mouth to protest, then thought better of it. If that is your wish, Your Excellence, should we at least provide you with a communication device in case of emergency? Very well, but I will use it only if necessary. Zwaxthara moved toward her private chambers. And Williams? Do not inform your governor of my plans. I suspect he would attempt to arrange my spontaneous encounters with your people. As the young diplomat departed, Zwaxthara began the complex mental processes required for her transformation. The change took nearly an hour and left her feeling temporarily disoriented, as if she had suddenly been compressed into a container several sizes too small. But it was a necessary discomfort. In her true form, she could never hope to observe humans as they actually were. Her presence would change everything, turning ordinary people into nervous performers. The next morning, she slipped out of the diplomatic tower through a service entrance, wearing a simple gray coverall that she had acquired from the quarters housekeeping staff. The transformation had worked perfectly. She looked like nothing more than a tall, slightly exotic visitor. Perhaps a trader from one of the Outer Rim colonies, or a scientist from one of the research stations. New Terra's main colony stretched out before her like a vast human hive. The architecture was practical rather than beautiful, built for function in the harsh environment of an alien world. But there was something appealing about its straightforward design. No unnecessary ornaments or grandiose displays. Just buildings designed to shelter people who were working to build a life far from their ancestral home. She walked the main thoroughfare, observing the morning routines of the colonists. Children hurried toward educational facilities, their backpacks bouncing as they ran. Adults moved with purpose toward various work sites, the mining operations, the atmospheric processors, the hydroponic farms that fed the colony. Everyone had a role, a purpose, a contribution to make to their community's survival. It was so different from the carefully choreographed performances she had witnessed at the formal dinners. These people were not trying to impress anyone. They were simply living their lives. Near the center of town, she discovered a small park area where several humans had gathered. Some were reading on benches beneath artificial trees designed to produce oxygen. Others were engaged in what appeared to be recreational activities, throwing discs, exercising with simple equipment, or simply talking together in small groups. At one end of the park sat a human male, perhaps 30 years of age by her estimation, with slightly disheveled brown hair and wearing work clothes that had seen better days. Beside him on the bench was a small human child, no more than 6 or 7 years old, with the same brown hair and wide, curious eyes. The child was speaking animatedly about something, waving tiny hands in elaborate gestures. The adult listened with complete attention, occasionally asking questions or making comments that would send the child into delighted giggles. Between them on the bench sat a simple meal, 2 sandwiches wrapped in plain paper, along with pieces of fruit and what appeared to be water in basic containers. Zwaxthara found herself drawn to watch them. There was something in their interaction that she hadn't seen in any of the formal diplomatic events. The adult, presumably the child's father, was completely focused on his young companion, not scanning the area for more important people to talk to, not checking a communication device, not performing for an audience, just genuinely engaged with this small person who clearly meant everything to him. The child finished whatever story he had been telling and unwrapped his sandwich with the careful concentration that young beings brought to important tasks. He bit into it with obvious pleasure, then offered a piece to his father, who accepted it with equal seriousness and took a bite. "It's good, Dad," the child said, his voice carrying clearly across the quiet park. "The purple jam makes it taste like the stories you tell about earth berries." The father smiled, and Zwaxthara was struck by how the expression transformed his entire face. Not the careful, diplomatic smile she had grown accustomed to, but something genuine and unguarded. "I'm glad you like it, Marcus. Your mom used to make sandwiches like this when I was your age. Simple, but made with love." Something about the scene called to her in a way that surprised her. The Dragon Queen, terror of a dozen star systems, ruler of ancient stellar empires, found herself walking toward the bench. She wasn't sure what she intended to say or do. She only knew that this simple moment held something that all the elaborate banquets had lacked. As she approached, the human male looked up. His eyes were kind but tired, the expression of someone carrying heavy responsibilities. When he saw her, he offered a polite nod. "Beautiful morning," he said simply. "Are you visiting New Terra? I don't think I've seen you around before." Zyaxthara paused, momentarily uncertain how to respond. In her true form, such casual conversation was impossible. People either fled in terror, bowed in formal respect, or tried desperately to impress her with their importance. No one had simply commented on the weather in decades. "Yes," she said carefully. "I am exploring your colony. It's quite different from what I expected." The child, Marcus, looked up at her with the fearless curiosity of the very young. "Are you an alien? You look different from most people, but in a pretty way." "Marcus," his father said gently, "remember what we talked about regarding polite questions?" But Zyaxthara found herself smiling, another expression she hadn't used genuinely in far too long. "It's quite all right. And, yes, young one, I am what you would call an alien. I come from very far away." Marcus's eyes grew wide with excitement. "Really? Do you have a spaceship? What's your planet like? Do you breathe air like us? Dad says there are people who breathe water and people who breathe fire, but I don't know if that's true or just stories." The father looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry, he's very curious about everything. I'm Jake Morrison, and this is my son Marcus. We're from Earth originally, but we've been here on New Terra for about 2 years. I am." Zyaxthara hesitated. She could hardly give her true name and title. "You may call me Ziza, and I find his questions refreshing. Most people are afraid to ask about such things." Jake gestured to the bench. "Would you like to sit? We've got plenty of space, and Marcus loves meeting new people. Fair warning, though, once he starts asking questions, it's hard to get him to stop." For reasons she couldn't fully explain, Zyaxthara found herself accepting the invitation. She settled onto the bench, her movements still carrying some of the careful grace of her true form. The simple wooden seat was nothing like the elaborate thrones and cushioned chairs she was accustomed to, but it felt oddly comfortable. Marcus immediately scooted closer, his sandwich forgotten in his excitement. "What's your planet like? Is it hot or cold? Do you have animals? What do you eat? Do you have kids like humans do?" One question at a time, Jake laughed. Let the lady get settled first. But Zyaxthara was already charmed by the child's enthusiasm. "My world is much warmer than yours," she said. "We have great crystal formations that grow like your trees, and the sky is often purple from our twin suns. We have creatures that might seem like dragons to you, though they are quite intelligent and peaceful." Marcus's mouth fell open. "Real dragons? Like in the stories?" "Very much like the stories, though perhaps more friendly than the tales suggest." Jake was watching her with interest, but not suspicion. "That sounds amazing. What brings you to New Terra? Are you here for the mining operations? Or maybe the research station?" Again, Zyaxthara found herself in unfamiliar territory. How did one explain being an all-powerful galactic diplomat without revealing one's identity? "I am evaluating your colony, trying to understand how humans live and work together." "Well, you've come to the right place," Jake said with a laugh. "Life here is pretty simple. Work hard, take care of each other, try to build something good for the next generation." He ruffled Marcus's hair affectionately. "Speaking of which, we should probably head home soon. Marcus has school this afternoon, and I need to get back to the atmospheric plant." But Marcus was not ready to let their new friend leave. "Wait, you haven't tried Dad's sandwich yet. He makes the best sandwiches on the whole colony. He puts love in them. That's his secret ingredient." Jake looked embarrassed again. "Marcus, I'm sure Ziza has her own food preferences. She probably doesn't eat the same things we do." But something about the child's earnest invitation touched something deep in Zyaxthara's ancient heart. "Actually, I would be honored to try your father's sandwich. I have been eating very elaborate meals lately, and I suspect something simple might be exactly what I need." Jake unwrapped his own sandwich and carefully tore it in half, offering the larger portion to her. "It's nothing fancy, just some of the protein paste we manufacture here, mixed with local vegetables, and that purple fruit spread Marcus mentioned." But Marcus is right. I do try to put love into everything I make for him. Zyaxthara accepted the offered food with more ceremony than it probably deserved. In her true form, she could have swallowed the entire thing without chewing. But in her smaller body, she was able to take a proper bite and actually taste what she was eating. The sandwich was indeed simple. The protein had a slightly artificial flavor that spoke of efficient manufacturing rather than natural sources. The vegetables were clearly grown in hydroponic systems, lacking some of the complexity that came from natural soil. The fruit spread was sweet, but had the concentrated taste of something designed to provide nutrition as much as flavor. And yet, There was something in that simple combination that made her pause. Something that had been missing from every elaborate feast she had attended in recent memory. It wasn't the quality of the ingredients or the sophistication of the preparation. It was something else entirely. This is, she began, then stopped. How could she explain that this humble sandwich, eaten on a simple bench with a single father and his young son, contained something that all the master chefs of 17-star systems had failed to provide? It's good, right? Marcus said eagerly. Dad says the secret ingredient is love, but I think it's also the way he cuts the corners off just the way I like them. Love. The word hit Zwaxtara like a physical blow. That's what had been missing from all those elaborate banquets. The food had been perfect, technically flawless, prepared with skill, and presented with artistry. But none of it had been made with love. It had been made to impress, to show wealth, to demonstrate importance. The chefs had been trying to create masterpieces, not to nourish the people who would eat their creations. This simple sandwich, made by a hard-working father for his beloved son, contained something no amount of expensive ingredients could provide. It had been made not to impress anyone, but simply because someone cared about the person who would eat it. Yes, she said quietly, taking another bite. It is very good indeed. The following morning, Zwaxtara found herself returning to the park. She told herself it was simply to continue her observation of human behavior, but she knew that wasn't entirely true. Something about yesterday's encounter had left her feeling unsettled in ways she couldn't quite explain. For the first time in decades, she had experienced genuine pleasure in a simple meal, and she found herself wanting to understand why. Jake and Marcus were there again, in the same spot, sharing what appeared to be another homemade meal. This time it was some kind of soup in a thermal container, along with thick slices of bread that gave off a pleasant aroma even from a distance. Marcus spotted her first. "Ziza," he called out, waving enthusiastically. "You came back. Dad said you might not, because grown-ups are always busy. But I told him you seemed like the kind of person who keeps promises, even if you didn't exactly promise." Jake looked up from ladling soup into a bowl for his son. "Good morning, Ziza. Marcus was hoping you'd come by again. I hope he wasn't too overwhelming yesterday." "Not at all," Zwaxtara said, settling onto the bench beside them. "I found our conversation quite educational." "Did you finish exploring the colony?" Marcus asked. "Did you see the big machines that clean the air? Did you go to the farms underground? Did you meet any other aliens?" "I saw many interesting things," she replied carefully. "But I think what interested me most was watching how your people live their daily lives. It's quite different from what I expected." Jake handed Marcus his soup and offered the remaining portion to Zwaxtara. "You're welcome to share again, if you'd like. It's just vegetable soup, nothing fancy, but it's warm and filling." As she accepted the offered food, Zwaxtara found herself studying Jake more carefully. His clothes were clean but worn, mended in several places with the kind of careful stitching that spoke of someone who couldn't afford to replace things easily. His hands were calloused from physical work, and there were permanent lines around his eyes that suggested someone who spent a lot of time squinting in bright light or dealing with stress. But, despite the signs of a difficult life, there was something peaceful about him. He moved with the calm efficiency of someone completely focused on the task at hand. In this case, making sure his son had a good meal and was properly cared for. "What kind of work do you do?" she asked. "I maintain the atmospheric processors," Jake explained between spoonfuls of soup. "Make sure the air stays breathable and the pressure stays stable. It's important work, but not exactly glamorous. Most people don't think about breathing until something goes wrong with the system." Marcus piped up proudly. "Dad keeps everyone alive. He says breathing is the most important thing people do, so his job is super important even if it's not fancy." Jake smiled at his son's enthusiasm. "What about you, Ziza? What do you do back on your homeworld?" It was a simple question, but one that made Zwaxtara pause. How did one explain being a galactic diplomat, responsible for trade agreements that affected billions of lives across multiple star systems? "I handle negotiations between different groups," she said finally. "I try to help people find ways to work together." "That sounds complicated," Marcus said. "Do you get to travel to lots of different places?" "Yes, quite a few. Though I'm beginning to think I may not have been paying attention to the right things during my travels." Jake gave her a curious look. "What do you mean?" Zwaxtara considered how to answer. "I spend most of my time in formal settings. Meeting with leaders, attending ceremonial functions, participating in elaborate protocols. But yesterday was the first time in a very long time that I simply sat with ordinary people and shared a meal without any agenda or ceremony. And how did that feel? Jake asked gently. Different. Better. In ways I'm still trying to understand. Marcus, who had been listening with the intense concentration that children brought to adult conversations they found interesting, suddenly brightened. Maybe you've been eating fancy food, but not happy food. Both adults looked at him with surprise. What do you mean, buddy? Jake asked. Well, Marcus said, clearly working through the concept as he spoke. Sometimes at school they give us special treats that look really pretty and probably cost a lot, but they don't taste as good as the cookies you make at home. And you said the secret ingredient in your cooking is love, right? Maybe fancy food doesn't have love in it because the people making it don't know the people eating it. Jake stared at his son with amazement. That's actually pretty wise, Marcus. HFY felt something click into place in her mind. Your son may have identified something that I've been struggling to understand for some time. She thought about all the elaborate banquets she had attended. The chefs who prepared those meals were certainly skilled, but they were performing for an audience, not nourishing people they cared about. The food was designed to impress rather than to satisfy, to demonstrate wealth and sophistication rather than to provide comfort and sustenance. Can I ask you something? She said to Jake. Why do you cook for Marcus yourself? Surely the colony has food services, places where you could obtain prepared meals. Jake looked slightly confused by the question. Well, yes, there are communal kitchens and food distribution centers. But, he paused, seeming to search for the right words. Marcus is my son. Taking care of him isn't just about making sure he gets enough calories and nutrients. It's about showing him that he's loved, that he matters enough for me to put time and effort into doing things for him personally. Plus, Marcus added, food tastes better when someone you love makes it for you. That's just science. Jake laughed. I don't think that's exactly science, buddy, but it might be true anyway. But, HFY was nodding thoughtfully. Actually, it might be more scientific than you think. Among my people, we have old stories about the connection between the preparation of food and the emotional state of the preparer. The idea that feelings can actually affect the taste and nutritional value of what we eat. Really, Marcus's eyes were wide with excitement. So love is really an ingredient? In a way, perhaps it is. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, finishing their soup and enjoying the mild warmth of New Terra's artificial sun. HFY found herself thinking about her own childhood, back on the crystal spires of her home world. Her earliest memories were of her mother preparing the traditional foods of their people, not because they couldn't afford servants to do the work, but because feeding one's offspring was considered one of the fundamental expressions of parental love. When had she stopped eating food prepared with that kind of care? When had every meal become a diplomatic performance instead of an act of nourishment? Ziza. Marcus's voice broke into her thoughts. Are you sad? You look like you're thinking sad thoughts. She looked down at the small human child, struck by his perceptiveness. Not sad exactly, just realizing that I may have forgotten some important things. What kind of things? Simple things, like the difference between eating to fill your stomach and eating to feed your soul. Jake gave her a thoughtful look. It sounds like your work keeps you pretty isolated from normal life. More than I realized, I think. Marcus suddenly brightened again, the way children did when they had an idea they were excited about. Hey, you should come have dinner with us tonight. Dad's making his special pasta. It's even better than his sandwiches, and he only makes it on special occasions. Marcus, Jake said gently, Ziza might have other plans. And our apartment isn't very fancy. She's probably used to much nicer accommodations. But HFY found herself genuinely touched by the invitation. When was the last time someone had invited her to their home simply because they enjoyed her company? I would be honored, she said. If you're certain it wouldn't be an imposition. Are you kidding? Marcus bounced in his seat with excitement. It'll be great. You can see our home, and meet Mr. Whiskers, and Dad can tell you stories about Earth while he cooks. Mr. Whiskers? HFY asked. Our cat. Jake explained with a slightly embarrassed smile. Marcus named him. He's a descendant of the ship cats that came with the original colonists. They needed them for pest control during the journey. Now he's basically a very spoiled pet who thinks he runs our household. I've never met a human cat before. Oh, you'll like him, Marcus assured her. He's very friendly, especially if you scratch behind his ears. And he always supervises when Dad cooks, to make sure everything is safe. As they gathered up their lunch containers, Jake gave HFY directions to their apartment complex. It was in one of the older sections of the colony, built during the early settlement years when resources were scarce, and every structure had to be purely functional. Fair warning, he said, it's not much to look at. 2 small rooms, basic furnishings, nothing fancy. But it's home. I think, Zwaxdara said quietly, that it will be exactly what I need to see. That evening, she made her way through the winding corridors of the residential section. The buildings here were different from the diplomatic quarters where she had been staying. Instead of soaring architecture and decorative elements, everything was designed for efficiency and comfort. The corridors were narrow but well lit, with bulletin boards covered in community notices and children's artwork. The sound of voices and laughter filtered through doorways, creating an atmosphere of life and activity that was completely absent from the formal diplomatic areas. Jake and Marcus's apartment was on the 3rd level, accessible by a simple mechanical lift. When Zwaxdara pressed the door chime, she could hear Marcus's excited voice calling, "She's here. Dad Ziza's here." Jake opened the door with a welcoming smile, wearing a casual shirt and apron that read "Galaxy's Best Dad" in slightly faded letters. "Welcome to our home," he said simply. The apartment was indeed small and basic, but Zwaxdara was immediately struck by how warm and lived in it felt. The walls were covered with Marcus's artwork and photographs of what she assumed were family members. Comfortable but well-worn furniture was arranged to maximize the limited space, and everything was clean and carefully organized. "Mr. Whiskers," Marcus called out, and a large orange cat emerged from what appeared to be the bedroom area. The animal approached Zwaxdara without fear, sniffing curiously at her legs before allowing her to pet him. "He likes you," Marcus announced. "Mr. Whiskers is a very good judge of character. Dad says cats can tell if people are trustworthy." The kitchen area was barely large enough for 2 people, but Jake moved around it with practiced efficiency. Pots bubbled on a small stove, and the smell of cooking filled the apartment with rich, savory aromas. Unlike the elaborate kitchens of the diplomatic quarters, this space contained only basic equipment, but everything was clean and well-maintained. "Can I help with anything?" Zwaxdara offered. "Just keep Marcus entertained while I finish up," Jake called over his shoulder. "He's been excited about this all day." Marcus immediately launched into a detailed tour of their home, pointing out his favorite books, his collection of interesting rocks found around the colony, and a small terrarium where he was growing earth flowers from seeds his father had brought from their home world. "These are forget-me-nots," he explained proudly. "Dad says my mom loved them when they lived on Earth. We're growing them so we can remember her." Zwaxdara felt a sudden understanding wash over her. "Your mother isn't here?" Marcus's expression grew serious, the way children did when discussing topics they didn't fully understand but knew were important. "She died when I was little. Dad says she got sick and the doctors couldn't fix her, but that she loved me very much and would want us to be happy." "I'm sorry for your loss," Zwaxdara said gently. "It's okay," Marcus said, though his voice was quieter now. "I don't remember her very much, but Dad tells me stories about her all the time. And he says she's why he learned to cook. She taught him that making food for people you love is one of the best ways to show you care about them." Jake's voice called from the kitchen. "Dinner's ready." They gathered around a small table that Jake had set with simple dishes and basic utensils. The pasta was indeed special, a complex sauce with layers of flavor that spoke of careful preparation and attention to detail. It was served with fresh bread and a simple salad made from vegetables grown in the colony's hydroponic farms. But, once again, it wasn't the sophistication of the meal that struck Zwaxdara. It was the care that had gone into every element. The way Jake watched to make sure both she and Marcus had everything they needed, the obvious pride he took in providing a good meal for his family and guest. "This is wonderful," she said, and meant it completely. "Dad's the best cook in the whole colony," Marcus declared loyally. "Maybe in the whole galaxy." Jake blushed slightly. "I just try to make things that taste good and are good for us. Nothing fancy." As they ate, Marcus regaled them with stories about his day at school, his plans for a science project about different types of alien plants, and his theories about what it would be like to visit other worlds. Jake listened with complete attention, asking questions and offering encouragement with the patience of someone who genuinely enjoyed his son's company. Watching them together, Zwaxdara began to understand something fundamental about human nature. These people didn't have great wealth or sophisticated technology. They lived simple lives in basic accommodations, working hard jobs to maintain their small colony on an alien world. But they had something that all the galactic empires she knew seemed to have lost somewhere along the way. They had connection. They had purpose that went beyond personal advancement or the accumulation of power. They took care of each other not because it was required or because it provided some advantage, but simply because they cared. After dinner, Jake insisted on showing her how he prepared his special sauce, patiently explaining each step and the reasoning behind it. He didn't cook like the master chefs she had observed. There were no dramatic techniques or exotic ingredients. Instead, he worked with quiet concentration, tasting and adjusting, adding ingredients in small amounts until the flavors balanced perfectly. The secret, he said, stirring the sauce slowly, is time and attention. You can't rush it, and you have to really pay attention to what you're doing. Most importantly, you have to be thinking about the people who will eat it while you're making it. Is that why it tastes different from restaurant food? Zwaxthara asked. Partly, I think. When you cook for people you love, it changes how you approach the whole process. You're not trying to impress anyone or show off your skills. You're just trying to make something that will make them happy and keep them healthy. Marcus, who had been quietly petting Mr. Whiskers, looked up suddenly. Ziza, are you lonely? You seem like maybe you don't have many people who cook for you. The question, asked with the innocent directness of childhood, hit closer to home than Zwaxthara had expected. Yes, I think I might be lonelier than I realized. Jake gave his son a proud look. Marcus is pretty good at noticing when people are sad or lonely. He gets that from his mom. But you don't have to be lonely, Marcus announced. You can come have dinner with us whenever you want. Right, Dad? Of course, Jake said warmly. You're always welcome here, Ziza. It's nice to have someone new to cook for. As the evening wound down, Zwaxthara found herself reluctant to leave. The small apartment, with its simple furnishings and warm atmosphere, felt more like home than the elaborate diplomatic quarters ever had. But, more than that, she felt truly seen and welcomed in a way that had nothing to do with her status or power. Thank you, she said as she prepared to go. This has been one of the most meaningful evenings I've had in a very long time. Will you come back tomorrow? Marcus asked hopefully. Dad's making breakfast pastries, and I want to show you my rock collection properly. I would like that very much, she replied. As she walked back through the quiet corridors toward the diplomatic section, Zwaxthara found herself thinking about the trade negotiations that had brought her to New Terra. The human representatives had been so focused on impressing her with their wealth and sophistication, trying to prove they were worthy partners for the great galactic powers. But they had been showing her the wrong things entirely. The real strength of humanity wasn't in their technology or their resources. It was in their capacity for connection, for caring about each other even in difficult circumstances, for finding joy and meaning in simple pleasures. She thought about Jake, working long hours to maintain the colony's life support systems, then coming home to care for his son with patience and love. She thought about Marcus, growing up without his mother but surrounded by security and affection that would shape him into a person capable of extending that same care to others. This was what humanity had to offer the galaxy, not just another trading partner or source of raw materials, but a reminder of what it meant to truly care for one another. And, for the first time in decades, Zwaxthara found herself genuinely excited about the negotiations ahead. 3 days later, Zwaxthara stood once again in the diplomatic tower, but this time she was not alone. Jake and Marcus sat on the elegant chairs across from her, both clearly nervous about being in such formal surroundings. Marcus kept looking around with wide eyes at the crystal decorations and precious artifacts that filled the ambassador's quarters. I still don't understand why you wanted us here, Jake said quietly. Surely whatever diplomatic business you need to conduct doesn't require ordinary citizens like us. Zwaxthara smiled, though in her true form the expression was somewhat intimidating. She had revealed her identity to them the previous morning, a decision that had shocked them both into temporary silence. Marcus had been the first to recover, declaring with characteristic directness that she was much scarier looking but still basically the same person inside. What I need to conduct, she said, is exactly the kind of business that requires ordinary citizens. You see, Jake, your government has been trying very hard to impress me with elaborate displays of wealth and sophistication. They believe that to earn a place in the Galactic Commerce Alliance, they must prove they are as refined and powerful as the established members. She gestured toward the window, where the colonial government building was visible in the distance. Even now, Governor Chun is preparing another feast in my honor. The menu includes delicacies from 7 different star systems, prepared by the finest chefs available. The cost of tonight's dinner alone could fund your atmospheric maintenance department for 6 months. Marcus looked thoughtful. That seems like a lot of money for one meal. It is indeed. And Therein lies the problem. Zhuangxtara moved to her desk, where the trade agreement documents lay waiting. Your people are trying to prove they belong among the great galactic powers by imitating what they believe makes those powers great. But they are imitating the wrong things. Jake was beginning to understand. The fancy dinners and expensive displays aren't what actually matters to you. Precisely. In fact, they have been having the opposite effect. Each elaborate feast convinced me further that humanity was simply another species obsessed with status and wealth, with nothing unique to contribute to the galactic community. She picked up one of the documents, a detailed analysis of human military capabilities and resource extraction potential. Your negotiators have been emphasizing your mining operations, your population growth, your technological development. All very impressive on paper, but none of it distinguishing you from dozens of other species seeking alliance membership. So what changed your mind? Jake asked. Zhuangxtara looked directly at him, then at Marcus. You did. Both of you. You showed me something that I had not encountered in decades of diplomatic missions across the galaxy. What's that? Marcus asked, leaning forward with curiosity. You showed me what it means to truly care for one another, to find joy and meaning in simple acts of kindness, to create something valuable not through grand gestures or expensive displays, but through love and attention to the people around you. She moved to stand before them, her massive form casting shadows across the room. Marcus, when your father makes you a sandwich, he is not simply providing you with nutrition. He is demonstrating that you matter enough for him to take time and care with something as basic as your daily bread. That simple act contains more genuine value than all the elaborate ceremonies I have attended in the past year. Marcus beamed with pride. I told you love was an ingredient. You did indeed. And you were more correct than you knew. Zhuangxtara turned to Jake. Your people have been trying to prove their worth through displays of what they can afford. But true worth cannot be purchased. It must be earned through character, through the way you treat others, through the values you demonstrate in your daily lives. Jake looked overwhelmed. I appreciate what you're saying, but I'm still not sure why you needed us here for this conversation. Because, Zhuangxtara said, moving to the communications panel, I am about to conduct the most important negotiation of my career, and I need witnesses who understand what I am actually negotiating for. She activated the long-range communication system, and within moments the holoprojector displayed the image of an imposing figure in elaborate robes. High Chancellor Vector of the Galactic Commerce Alliance had the stern, aristocratic bearing of someone accustomed to absolute authority. Ambassador Zhuangxtara, the Chancellor's voice echoed through the room. I trust your evaluation of the human colony is complete. The Commerce Council awaits your recommendation regarding their application for associate membership. Indeed, Chancellor, I have completed my evaluation, and I have reached a decision that may surprise the Council. The Chancellor's expression remained neutral, but there was a hint of impatience in his voice. Please proceed with your report. Zhuangxtara straightened to her full height, every inch the powerful diplomat she had been for centuries. I recommend that humanity be granted full membership in the Galactic Commerce Alliance, with all the rights and privileges thereof. There was a moment of stunned silence. Even through the holographic connection, the Chancellor's shock was evident. Full membership? Ambassador, surely you mean associate status. They are a young species, barely established beyond their home system. They lack the resources and influence for full membership. With respect, Chancellor, they possess something far more valuable than resources or influence. They have demonstrated a capacity for genuine community that I have not observed in any other species during my centuries of service. The Chancellor's expression grew skeptical. Community? Ambassador, please clarify your meaning. Zhuangxtara gestured toward Jake and Marcus, who were watching the proceedings with fascination. These humans have shown me that true civilization is not measured by the sophistication of one's technology or the grandeur of one's architecture. It is measured by how well a people care for one another, particularly their most vulnerable members. I fail to see how this relates to their qualifications for alliance membership. Then, allow me to explain. In my travels throughout Alliance space, I have observed a disturbing trend. Our great civilizations have become obsessed with power and prestige. We have lost touch with the simple virtues that once made us worthy of respect. We feast on delicacies that cost more than most beings earn in a lifetime, while entire worlds struggle with basic necessities. We compete to display our wealth and sophistication, while our own people become increasingly isolated from one another. The Chancellor's image flickered slightly as he leaned forward. Ambassador, I hope you are not suggesting that the Alliance has somehow failed in its mission. I am suggesting that we have forgotten part of that mission. We have become very good at managing commerce and maintaining order, but we have lost sight of what commerce and order are supposed to serve. They should serve the well-being of all our citizens, not just the aggrandizement of the powerful. Ziwaxtara moved to stand beside Jake and Marcus. These humans reminded me of something I had forgotten. A single father, working long hours to maintain his colony's life support systems, still finds time and energy to prepare meals for his son with love and attention. A child, growing up without his mother, still approaches each day with curiosity and joy because he knows he is loved and valued. Marcus whispered loudly, "Is this about my dad's sandwiches?" Despite the formal nature of the proceedings, Ziwaxtara found herself smiling. "Yes, Marcus. It is very much about your father's sandwiches." The Chancellor looked confused. "Sandwiches? Ambassador, what exactly are you talking about?" "I am talking about the difference between nourishment and mere consumption, Chancellor. I am talking about the difference between a society that cares for its members and one that simply manages them. These humans may not have the vast fleets or ancient technologies of the older Alliance members, but they have something we seem to have lost." She turned back to the communication panel. They remember that the point of civilization is not to accumulate power for its own sake, but to create conditions where people can flourish, where a father can work hard at an important job and still have energy left to care for his son, where a child can grow up feeling secure and loved, even in difficult circumstances. "Ambassador," the Chancellor said slowly, "while these observations are touching, I fail to see how they qualify humanity for full Alliance membership. What concrete benefits would they bring to our organization? They would remind us why we created the Alliance in the first place, Chancellor. Not to create an elite club of the powerful, but to foster cooperation and mutual aid among all sapient beings. They would bring fresh perspective to our councils, unencumbered by centuries of accumulated cynicism and political calculation." Jake cleared his throat nervously. Excuse me, but shouldn't humanity's government representatives be involved in this conversation?" Ziwaxtara looked down at him with something approaching affection. "Jake, you and Marcus are the most qualified representatives I could ask for. You embody the values that make your species worthy of Alliance membership. Your government officials, well-meaning though they are, have been trying to make humanity into something it is not." She turned back to the Chancellor. "The formal representatives have been attempting to impress me with displays of wealth and military capability. They believe that to join the Alliance, they must become like us. But what the Alliance needs is not another species trying to imitate the older members. What we need is a species that can remind us of what we have forgotten." The Chancellor was quiet for a long moment, clearly processing this unexpected turn in the negotiations. "And what, specifically, have we forgotten?" "We have forgotten that the greatest accomplishment of any civilization is not the monuments it builds or the conquests it achieves, but the daily kindness its people show to one another. We have forgotten that true strength comes not from the ability to intimidate others, but from the willingness to care for those who depend on us." Marcus tugged on his father's sleeve and whispered, "Dad, are we really going to be in space with aliens?" Jake whispered back, "I think so, buddy. I think we are." The Chancellor seemed to come to a decision. "Ambassador Ziwaxtara, your recommendation is highly irregular. Full membership requires unanimous approval from the Commerce Council, and I suspect many members will question your reasoning. Then, I will address the full council personally, Chancellor. I will explain that humanity offers us something more valuable than another source of raw materials or another market for our goods. They offer us the chance to remember what we are supposed to be working toward." "Very well. I will convene an emergency session of the Council. You will present your case within the cycle. I trust you will prepare a more formal presentation than this conversation has been. Actually, Chancellor, I would like to request permission to bring Jake and Marcus with me to address the Council." The Chancellor looked as though he might have misheard. "Bring them?" "Ambassador, the Commerce Council is not a place for ordinary citizens," Ziwaxtara finished. "Perhaps that is exactly the problem. Perhaps it is time the Council heard from the people our decisions actually affect, rather than only from diplomats and politicians who have forgotten what normal life looks like." There was another long silence. Finally, the Chancellor nodded slowly. "Very well, Ambassador. If you believe their testimony is relevant to humanity's application, you may bring them to the session. But, I warn you, the council will not be impressed by sentimentality. They will want concrete reasons to grant such unprecedented membership status. I understand, Chancellor. And I believe that once the council meets Jake and Marcus, they will understand exactly why humanity deserves full membership. The communication ended, leaving the three of them alone in the suddenly quiet chamber. Jake sat in stunned silence, while Marcus bounced excitedly in his chair. "We're going to see the Space Council," Marcus exclaimed. "Wait until I tell everyone at school." Jake looked at ZYXThra with a mixture of amazement and concern. "Are you sure about this? I'm just a maintenance worker. I don't know anything about galactic politics or trade agreements." "Jake," she said gently, "that is exactly why your voice needs to be heard. The council has spent so long listening to politicians and diplomats that they have forgotten what politics and diplomacy are supposed to accomplish. They need to be reminded that all our grand strategies and complex treaties are supposed to serve one simple goal: making life better for people like you and Marcus." She moved to the window, gazing out at the colony where thousands of humans were going about their daily lives, working, learning, raising families, building something good in a harsh environment. "Your species may be young compared to the great galactic powers, but you have retained something that we lost long ago. You still remember that the measure of a civilization is not how much power it can accumulate, but how well it cares for its people." "What if the council doesn't agree?" Jake asked. ZYXThra considered this seriously. "Then, the Alliance will have missed an opportunity to rediscover what it was meant to be. But I have faith that when they meet you, when they hear your story and understand what you represent, they will make the right choice." Marcus jumped up from his chair. "Can we bring Mr. Whiskers to the Space Council too?" Both adults laughed. "I don't think that will be necessary," Jake said. "But we'll tell him all about it when we get back." As they prepared to leave the diplomatic tower, ZYXThra reflected on how much had changed in just a few days. She had come to New Terra expecting to conduct a routine evaluation of a minor species seeking Alliance membership. Instead, she had rediscovered something essential about her own purpose as a diplomat and leader. The elaborate banquets and formal ceremonies that filled her usual schedule served their purpose in maintaining diplomatic relationships and demonstrating respect between cultures. But they could also become barriers, preventing real understanding between peoples. Sometimes the most important negotiations happen not in grand chambers filled with pomp and protocol, but on simple park benches, over humble meals shared with an open heart. 3 days later, the Commerce Council convened in the Great Crystal Amphitheater on Nexus Prime, the Alliance's capital world. Representatives from 47 different species gathered to hear ZYXThra's unprecedented recommendation for human membership. Jake and Marcus sat in the witness section, both wearing their best clothes but still looking decidedly out of place among the elaborate costumes and ceremonial robes of the galactic elite. Marcus kept staring in wonder at the various alien species around them, while Jake seemed overwhelmed by the sheer scale and grandeur of the proceedings. Chancellor Vector called the session to order and invited ZYXThra to present her case. She rose from her position among the Drakthari delegation and moved to the central speaking platform, her massive form commanding instant attention from the assembled representatives. "Honored counselors," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "I stand before you today to recommend that humanity be granted full membership in our alliance. Not because they have demonstrated military might or accumulated vast wealth, but because they have shown us something we have forgotten how to value." She gestured toward Jake and Marcus in the witness section. "I present to you Jake Morrison and his son Marcus, citizens of the human colony of New Terra. They are not diplomats or politicians or wealthy merchants. Jake maintains atmospheric systems that keep his colony alive. Marcus is a 6-year-old child who collects interesting rocks and asks questions about everything he encounters." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several representatives looked confused about why such ordinary individuals had been brought before the council. "I have spent centuries evaluating species for alliance membership," ZYXThra continued. "I have seen countless displays of technological advancement, military capability, and economic potential. But in my time with Jake and Marcus, I witnessed something far more rare and valuable. I saw what it means to truly care for others, to find joy in simple acts of kindness, to build meaning through love rather than through conquest or accumulation." She paused, allowing her words to settle. "Jake works long hours at a critical job, ensuring that thousands of people can breathe safely on an alien world. But when his workday ends, he does not collapse in exhaustion or seek entertainment to escape his responsibilities. Instead, he goes home and prepares meals for his son with the same care and attention that he brings to maintaining life support systems. Not because it is required, but because it brings him joy to care for someone he loves. Chancellor Vector leaned forward. Ambassador, while such personal dedication is admirable, how does it qualify humanity for Alliance membership? Because, Chancellor, it represents a quality that we have lost in our pursuit of greatness. When did you last prepare a meal with your own hands for someone you cared about? When did any of us last find genuine satisfaction in simple acts of service to others? She turned to address the full council. We have built a magnificent alliance, capable of coordinating trade across thousands of worlds and maintaining peace among species that once warred constantly. But, in our success, we have become detached from the very people our alliance was created to serve. We feast on delicacies while our citizens eat processed nutrients. We live in palaces while they struggle with basic housing. We conduct elaborate ceremonies while they work thankless jobs that keep our civilizations functioning. Representative Kelnara of the Zentari Empire spoke up. Are you suggesting that we have somehow failed our people, Ambassador? I am suggesting that we have forgotten what success should look like. True success is not measured by the grandeur of our capitals or the complexity of our technologies. It is measured by whether ordinary citizens like Jake can find meaning and satisfaction in their daily lives, whether children like Marcus can grow up feeling secure and valued. She gestured again toward the witness section. Jake has never commanded a fleet or negotiated a treaty or accumulated vast wealth. But he has achieved something more valuable than any of those accomplishments. He has created a life of purpose and love in difficult circumstances. Every day, he makes choices that prioritize the well-being of others over his own comfort or advancement. Marcus, who had been listening with the intense concentration he brought to important adult conversations, suddenly stood up. Can I say something? The chamber fell silent. Several representatives looked shocked that a child would speak without formal permission. Chancellor Vector looked uncertain. The witness section is not typically, let him speak, Zwaxthara said firmly. His perspective may be exactly what this council needs to hear. Marcus walked to the speaking platform, completely unintimidated by the hundreds of powerful beings staring at him. Hi, he said simply. I'm Marcus. My dad takes care of everyone in our colony by making sure they can breathe, and he takes care of me by making the best sandwiches in the galaxy. A few chuckles rippled through the chamber. Ambassador Zwaxthara, says you're all very important people who make decisions about lots of planets. That sounds like a big job. But I was wondering, do you remember what it feels like when someone makes something special just for you? Not because they have to, but because they want you to be happy. The chamber was completely silent now. Because that's what my dad does every day. He makes me lunch not because it's a rule or because someone told him to, but because he loves me and wants me to have good food that tastes like home. And I think that's what makes people want to be friends with each other. Not because they have to, but because they care about each other. Marcus looked around the vast chamber with complete sincerity. If you let humans be in your alliance, I think we could help you remember what it feels like to do things because you care about people, not just because you have to. My dad says that's the most important thing in the whole galaxy. He walked back to his seat, leaving the council in stunned silence. Representative Thylara of the Crystal Collective was the first to speak. The child makes an interesting point. When did we last act from genuine care rather than obligation or political calculation? More importantly, added Counselor Vex of the Titanium Hegemony, when did we last allow our decisions to be influenced by such considerations? We speak of trade volumes and strategic advantages, but what about the actual well-being of the people affected by our policies? Chancellor Vector looked thoughtful. Ambassador Zwaxthara, you are asking us to fundamentally reconsider how we evaluate alliance membership, to prioritize character over capability, values over resources. I am asking you to remember why we created the alliance in the first place, she replied. Not to build an empire of the powerful, but to create a community where all species could flourish. Humanity may not yet possess the vast fleets or ancient technologies of the older members, but they possess something we desperately need. They remember what it means to care for one another. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Representative after representative voiced concerns about precedent, about practical considerations, about the reactions of other species who had been required to demonstrate military and economic strength before gaining membership. But, gradually, a different conversation began to emerge. Counselors started sharing their own memories of simpler times, of moments when they had found satisfaction in basic acts of kindness or service. They talked about the distance that had grown between the Alliance leadership and the ordinary citizens they claimed to serve. Finally, Representative Zalthor of the Ancient Rings spoke from his position among the eldest members of the council. In my 7 centuries of service to this alliance, I have seen us accomplish remarkable things. We have ended wars, facilitated trade that has lifted billions out of poverty, and created stability across vast regions of space. But I realize now that in our pursuit of these grand achievements, we may have lost touch with the simple virtues that made those achievements worthwhile. He turned to look directly at Jake and Marcus. If humanity can help us remember what we are working toward, then perhaps they offer us the most valuable contribution possible. The vote, when it came, was closer than Zwaxthara had expected. Not all representatives were convinced that humanity's unique qualities outweighed their limited resources and experience. But, in the end, the decision was clear. Humanity would be granted full membership in the Galactic Commerce Alliance, with all the rights and responsibilities thereof. As the council chamber emptied, Jake approached Zwaxthara with tears in his eyes. I still can't believe this happened. A week ago, I was just a maintenance worker trying to raise my son. Now you're telling me that humanity has a place among the galactic powers. Humanity has always had that place, Jake. You just needed someone to recognize it. She knelt down to Marcus's level. And you, young one, may have given the most important speech in Alliance history. Marcus beamed with pride. Does this mean we get to meet more aliens? Because that would be really cool. I suspect you will meet many more aliens in the years to come, and I think they will be better people for having met you. As they prepared to return to New Terra, Zwaxthara reflected on the changes that the past week had brought. The trade agreement she would now negotiate would be far more comprehensive than originally planned, opening up opportunities for humanity that would have been unimaginable just days before. But, more importantly, the Alliance itself had been reminded of something it had nearly forgotten. The elaborate banquets and formal ceremonies would continue. They served important purposes in maintaining diplomatic relationships. But perhaps they could also make room for simpler gatherings, for moments of genuine connection between leaders and the people they served. Perhaps they could remember that the greatest accomplishment of any civilization was not the monuments it built or the power it accumulated, but the daily kindness its people showed to one another. And perhaps, in the years to come, when Alliance representatives gathered to make decisions that would affect billions of lives, they would remember a 6-year-old boy who stood before the most powerful beings in the galaxy and reminded them what it felt like to do things because you cared about people, not just because you had to. The Dragon Queen had refused countless royal banquets, each more elaborate than the last. But a human single-dad sandwich, made with love for his son, had changed everything.